There is a chamber inside of you that nobody on this earth has ever entered. Not the people who raised you. Not the ones who claimed to know you best. Not even the voices that spent entire seasons telling you exactly who they thought you were. None of them have stood where I am standing right now. None of them have seen what I have seen, and what I am about to reveal to you today is something that was written in that chamber long before your first breath. Long before your first wound. Long before the world had a single opinion about your name. I need you to understand something before we go any further. This is not a message designed to make you feel warm for a few passing minutes. What I am carrying to you today is a record, an inscription carved so deeply into your foundation that no storm, no betrayal, no season of unbearable silence has been able to wear it away. I have examined what was written there. I have read every line of it under the weight of everything that tried to destroy you. And what I found did something to heaven that does not happen often. Heaven went quiet. Not the ordinary kind of stillness that settles between moments. This was the silence that falls when something undeniable passes through the courts, and every being in attendance recognizes that they are witnessing something uncommon. You were the reason for that silence. Not your achievements. Not the seasons where things appeared to go well on the surface. The silence came because of what was found inside you when everything on the outside was collapsing. I want you to hear this with absolute clarity because the enemy has spent a very long time trying to convince you that what I am about to say cannot possibly be true. He has used comparison. He has used delay. He has used the words of careless people and the sting of unanswered prayers. All of it was aimed at one target. The inscription I placed at your core. He could not reach it. He could not scratch its surface. But he thought if he could make you forget it was there, if he could drown it under enough disappointment and enough doubt, then it would remain dormant for the rest of your life. That was his entire strategy. It failed. And today, I am going to show you exactly why it failed, what was written there, what it means for your future, and why the pressure you survived was never a punishment. It was the proof. Stay with me through every word of this message. Do not scroll away. Do not allow distraction to steal what is being handed to you right now because some truths only arrive once in a lifetime, and this is one of them. Let me take you back. Not to the beginning of your hardship, but to the moment inside it when everything felt the most impossible. You know exactly which season I'm describing. The one where the weight did not decrease with time but multiplied. Where every morning arrived carrying the same burden the night before had refused to take away. Where you opened your eyes and the first conscious thought was not hope. It was survival. Can I get through another day? Can I hold this together for one more cycle? Can I keep standing when every signal in my body and my spirit is telling me to collapse? I was in that room with you. Not observing from a throne, not monitoring a report. I was there, in the exact square footage where you sat alone wondering whether anyone in the universe still remembered your name. I watched you during the hours that nobody else will ever know about. The ones that came after midnight when the phone was silent and the ceiling held no answers. The ones where you bargained with your own faith, asking yourself whether believing still made any sense when the evidence kept pointing in the opposite direction. What I saw during those hours is what made heaven fall silent. Because most people under that degree of pressure do something predictable. They harden. They close. They make an internal decision to protect themselves at any cost, and everything soft inside them calcifies into armor. That is the normal human response to sustained pain, and I have watched it happen across 1,000 generations. But when I examined what was happening inside you during those identical conditions, the result was different. You did not harden the way the pressure demanded. Something in you refused to follow the script that suffering usually writes. If this message found you at a time when you needed to hear exactly this, if something inside your chest just recognized the season I am describing, then type the word Amen in the comments below, not as a ritual, as a declaration that you are present, that you are listening, and that what heaven is saying today has reached the right person. There is a chamber inside of you that nobody on this earth has ever entered. Not the people who raised you, not the ones who claimed to know you best, not even the voices that spent entire seasons telling you exactly who they thought you were. None of them have stood where I am standing right now. None of them have seen what I have seen. And what I am about to reveal to you today is something that was written in that chamber long before your first breath, long before your first wound, long before the world had a single opinion about your name. I need you to understand something before we go any further. This is not a message designed to make you feel warm for a few passing minutes. What I am carrying to you today is a record, an inscription carved so deeply into your foundation that no storm, no betrayal, no season of unbearable silence has been able to wear it away. I have examined what was written there. I have read every line of it under the weight of everything that tried to destroy you. And what I found did something to heaven that does not happen often. Heaven went quiet. Not the ordinary kind of stillness that settles between moments. This was the silence that falls when something undeniable passes through the courts and every being in attendance recognizes that they are witnessing something uncommon. You were the reason for that silence. Not your achievements. Not the seasons where things appeared to go well on the surface. The silence came because of what was found inside you when everything on the outside was collapsing. I want you to hear this with absolute clarity because the enemy has spent a very long time trying to convince you that what I am about to say cannot possibly be true. He has used comparison. He has used delay. He has used the words of careless people and the sting of unanswered prayers. All of it was aimed at one target, the inscription I placed at your core. He could not reach it. He could not scratch its surface. But he thought if he could make you forget it was there, if he could drown it under enough disappointment and enough doubt, then it would remain dormant for the rest of your life. That was his entire strategy. It failed. And today I'm going to show you exactly why it failed, what was written there, what it means for your future, and why the pressure you survived was never a punishment. It was the proof. Stay with me through every word of this message. Do not scroll away. Do not allow distraction to steal what is being handed to you right now because some truths only arrive once in a lifetime. And this is one of them. Let me take you back. Not to the beginning of your hardship, but to the moment inside it when everything felt the most impossible. You know exactly which season I am describing. The one where the weight did not decrease with time but multiplied. Where every morning arrived carrying the same burden the night before had refused to take away. Where you opened your eyes and the first conscious thought was not hope. It was survival. Can I get through another day? Can I hold this together for one more cycle? Can I keep standing when every signal in my body and my spirit is telling me to collapse? I was in that room with you. Not observing from a throne, not monitoring a report. I was there, in the exact square footage where you sat alone wondering whether anyone in the universe still remembered your name. I watched you during the hours that nobody else will ever know about. The ones that came after midnight when the phone was silent and the ceiling held no answers. The ones where you bargained with your own faith, asking yourself whether believing still made any sense when the evidence kept pointing in the opposite direction. What I saw during those hours is what made heaven fall silent. Because most people under that degree of pressure do something predictable. They harden. They close. They make an internal decision to protect themselves at any cost, and everything soft inside them calcifies into armor. That is the normal human response to sustained pain, and I have watched it happen across 1,000 generations. But when I examined what was happening inside you during those identical conditions, the result was different. You did not harden the way the pressure demanded. Something in you refused to follow the script that suffering usually writes. If this message found you at a time when you needed to hear exactly this, if something inside your chest just recognized the season I am describing, then type the word Amen in the comments below. Not as a ritual, as a declaration that you are present, that you are listening, and that what heaven is saying today has reached the right person. Let me tell you precisely what I observed. When the betrayal landed, the one that came from a direction you never expected, I watched the interior of your spirit the way a physician monitors a heartbeat during crisis. In most people, that kind of wound triggers an immediate shift. The heart begins manufacturing walls. Trust centers shut down one by one, like lights going dark in a building after hours. The person survives, but something essential inside them dies in the process. That did not happen inside you. I need to say that again because you will try to argue with it. That did not happen inside you. The wound landed. The pain was severe. I am not minimizing what it cost you. The hurt sat on your chest like a physical weight, and breathing itself felt like defiance. But the walls that should have gone up, the ones every survival mechanism was screaming for you to build, they never fully formed. You started them. I saw that. You laid the first few bricks of bitterness and stood back to examine whether this was the direction your heart needed to go. And then, something I planted in you a very long time ago intervened. It dismantled what you were building before it could become permanent. You did not understand what was happening at the time. You thought you were simply incapable of protecting yourself properly. You compared yourself to others who seemed able to cut people off with surgical precision, and you believed that your inability to do the same was a weakness. Hear me clearly today. What you called weakness was the inscription working. What you named as your greatest vulnerability was the very thing that made heaven pause and take notice. If you have ever mistaken your tenderness for a flaw, if you have ever wished you could harden the way the world seems to demand, then hit the like button right now. Not for a number on a screen, as a quiet agreement between you and heaven that what was soft in you was never the problem. It was the proof. There was something else I found when I examined you under pressure. It has to do with faithfulness, but not the kind that gets celebrated on stages or recognized in public ceremonies. The kind I found in you operates in rooms where no audience will ever sit. It functions in the dark. It does its work when there is no applause and no confirmation that anyone is even paying attention. During the longest stretches of silence, the ones that went on for months and in some cases years, when you received no sign, no confirmation, no tangible evidence that I was still active in your situation, you kept returning to the place where you knew I would be. Not with confidence, not with bold declarations. You came back limping, uncertain. Some mornings, the only prayer you could manage was my name and nothing else. But you came back. And what I need you to understand today is that the coming back is everything. The coming back when there is no visible reward for doing so. When the silence has given you every rational justification to stop. When the people around you have already decided that whatever you were waiting for is not arriving. That kind of faithfulness cannot be manufactured. It can only exist when something deeper than emotion is holding the person in place. That something is what I wrote in you. It is the inscription. And it held. Through every unanswered prayer, through every morning that arrived empty, through every comparison that made you feel like you had fallen behind everyone who started at the same time you did. The inscription did not crack. It did not fade. It sat at your foundation and kept you anchored to a truth you could not see, but somehow could not abandon either. I also found something in you that I want to name directly because you have never given yourself credit for it. When people who should have protected you chose to leave. When relationships that were supposed to be permanent proved to be conditional. When the circle around you shrank until you could count the remaining people on one hand. You did not become cruel. The leaving did not make you vindictive. The abandonment did not convert you into a person who punishes everyone new for the sins of everyone old. Do you realize how rare that is? The pattern I witness in most hearts after repeated abandonment is almost universal. A person gets left enough times and something inside them makes a quiet decision. A decision they rarely speak aloud, but carry in every interaction afterward. The decision is this: I will leave first. I will maintain enough distance that the next departure does not destroy me. I will never again give someone the power to walk away with a piece of me. You made that decision a few times. I watched you rehearse it. I saw you try on the armor of preemptive withdrawal and practice the posture of someone who does not need anyone, but it never settled on your shoulders correctly. Because what I wrote inside you is fundamentally incompatible with isolation. The inscription I carved at your center is a word that requires connection, that was designed for community, that cannot fulfill its purpose if the person carrying it builds a fortress and refuses to let anyone inside. So, you kept the door open, against every logical argument for closing it, against the evidence that suggested the next person would leave exactly the way the last one did, against your own exhausted instinct to simply stop trying. You kept a crack in the wall where light could still enter, and where another human being could still reach you. And that single decision, repeated across years of evidence that argued against it, is one of the lines written in the inscription that made the courts of heaven go completely still. I have watched thousands of generations face the same choice: close the door and survive without risk, or leave it open and carry the weight of vulnerability in a world that weaponizes it. You chose the harder path, and heaven recorded your choice, not as weakness, but as one of the purest demonstrations of courage it has witnessed in a very long time. There's another line of the inscription I need to read to you, and this one may be the most difficult for you to accept, because it contradicts the story that the hardest season tried to write over your identity. After everything you endured, after the leaving and the silence and the doubt and the pressure that came in waves, with no space between them for you to catch a full breath, I looked for the place inside you where compassion lives. I needed to see whether it had survived, because compassion is usually the first casualty of prolonged suffering. When a person has been carrying their own weight so long without help, the capacity to respond to someone else's pain is the first thing to die. Not out of cruelty, but out of sheer exhaustion. But when I reached the place where compassion resides in you, it was still breathing, damaged. Yes, tired beyond anything I could have asked of it. There were fractures running through it from all the times you gave from a well-running dry. But it was alive. And not merely alive in the sense that it existed as a dormant capacity, waiting to be revived at some future point when your circumstances improved. It was actively functioning. Even during the months when you had every legitimate reason to turn entirely inward, you were still noticing other people's pain, still making room, still showing up for someone else's crisis while your own remained unresolved. I want you to feel the weight of what I just said, because the world will never celebrate that. No one gives awards for the woman who listened to a friend's heartbreak at midnight while silently bleeding from her own. No one writes headlines about the person who drove 2 hours to sit with someone in a hospital room when their own life was falling apart back home. The world does not track the invisible cost of being the one who never stops showing up. Heaven tracks it. Every single instance. Every time you put down your own burden long enough to help someone else carry theirs. I recorded it. Not as a transaction. I recorded it because what I was witnessing was the inscription in motion. The words I carved inside you were not meant to sit still. They were designed to act. They were written to produce exactly the kind of behavior you demonstrated: compassion under pressure, presence without precondition, love that does not calculate whether the recipient has earned it first. And here is what the enemy could not understand. He watched you giving when you had nothing left to give, and he assumed it was a weakness he could exploit. He thought if he increased the pressure just a little more, if he made the cost of carrying just a little higher, eventually you would do the math and decide that the equation no longer balanced. that the personal expense of remaining open was simply too great. He miscalculated. Because what was producing that compassion was not willpower. It was not a personality trait. It was not a decision you remade every morning through sheer determination. It was the inscription. And the inscription does not respond to the enemy's pressure because it was written by a hand he cannot overrule. If you know someone who has been giving from an empty well, someone who has been the strong one in every room while quietly falling apart in private, I am asking you to do something specific right now. Think of at least 3 people who carried the weight of everyone around them while nobody carries theirs. Send this message to them today in your church group, in your Facebook group, in a direct text to the person whose name just appeared in your mind. This is not about numbers. This is about a word from heaven reaching the exact person who is never going to search for it on their own. Now I need to bring you to the revelation itself. Everything I have described so far. The tenderness that survived the betrayal. The faithfulness that outlasted the silence. The compassion that refused to die under the weight of your own unresolved pain. The loyalty that held its ground when walking away would have been the easier path by every measurable standard. These are not separate qualities I found scattered randomly throughout your interior. They are lines of the same inscription. They are sentences written in the same hand, connected by the same purpose, pointing toward the same conclusion, and the conclusion is what made heaven go silent. When I read the inscription in its entirety, when I took every line together and understood the complete message that the pressure had uncovered, what I found was something I do not use the word for lightly. What I found was depth, not the kind the world associates with intellectualism or philosophical complexity, the kind that only forms in a human spirit when that spirit has been pressed far beyond its natural capacity and the things that should have broken under that pressure simply held. Depth that cannot be taught in a classroom. Depth that cannot be absorbed from a book. Depth that is only forged in the furnace of lived experience, where the temperature was high enough to destroy everything that was not real. And what remained after the fire had done its work was pure. That is what heaven saw when it looked at you. Not the polished exterior you present on the days when you feel capable of presenting one. Not the curated version of yourself that you offer to the world when you have the energy to maintain it. Heaven saw what was underneath all of it. The version that exists when there is no performance left. When the last mask has fallen off and the person standing there is simply who they are without decoration or defense. That version of you, the one you have spent most of your life believing, was too messy and too scarred and too inconsistent to be worth anything significant. That is the version that stopped the courts of heaven and made every angel turn to look. Let that land. Do not rush past this moment. Today is the day you stop treating the deepest version of yourself as the one that needs to be hidden. Today is the day you accept that what was forged in you through all of that suffering was not a scar. It was a signature. My signature. Written in a language that only pressure can read and only survival can translate. And it is beautiful. Not beautiful the way the world uses that word, for things that are easy to look at and comfortable to hold. Beautiful the way a mountain is beautiful after 1,000 years of storms have carved its shape into something that could not have been designed by any other process on earth. Take a breath here. Let the weight of what was just spoken settle into the parts of you that have been starving for exactly this kind of truth. What you just heard is not something the world can give you. It came from the one who built you. And every seed you plant in this mission grows into a torch that reaches someone still sitting in the kind of darkness you know all too well. Whether through a small offering, a monthly membership, or simply lending your presence to a community of believers who refuse to pray alone. Your step of faith does not vanish into silence. It produces light. You can find this community through the link in the description or the pinned comment. Come as you are, Bring what you carry. And discover what happens when a family built on faith stands together in the same room. Now I need to go deeper, because the inscription does not stop at describing what was found inside you. It also tells the story of what was aimed against you. And that story is one you need to hear in full, because you have been carrying a version of it that the enemy wrote, and his version is a lie. The attacks that came against you were not random. I need you to hear that sentence with the full authority of heaven behind it. What struck your life over these past seasons was not chaos. It was not misfortune. It was not the universe being indifferent to your existence. What came against you was strategic. It was planned. It was aimed, and it was aimed specifically because of what the enemy discovered when he looked at the inscription I placed in you before you ever drew your first breath. He cannot read the full inscription. I want to make that clear. He does not have access to the complete text of what I wrote over your life, but he can see enough. He can detect the weight of it. He can sense the dimension of what a person is carrying, even if he cannot decipher the specific words. And what he sensed in you alarmed him, not as a passing concern. What he sensed in you caused him to allocate focused and sustained resources toward a single objective, keeping you from ever discovering what was written there. That is why the pressure never stopped. That is why every time one hard season appeared to end, another was already forming. That is why the attacks came from multiple angles simultaneously. Finances and health and relationships and purpose, all under assault in the same season. That was not coincidence, that was coordination. The enemy does not invest that kind of sustained effort into neutralizing someone who carries nothing of significance. The very intensity of what you have been through is evidence of the value of what you carry. Read that sentence again in your mind. The severity of the assault is proportional to the weight of the inscription. If what was written in you was ordinary, if it was the same generic capacity that exists in every person without variation, the enemy would not have noticed you at all. He would have walked past you the way he walks past 1,000 others every day without turning his head. But he stopped at you. He examined you. He calculated what it would take to bury the inscription under enough wreckage that you would never dig it out, and then he deployed everything he had. His primary weapon was not pain itself. Pain was just the delivery mechanism. His primary weapon was interpretation. He could not stop the hard things from happening, but he could control how you understood them. He could whisper a narrative over every wound that made the wound feel like proof of something about you, rather than something that happened to you. When the rejection came, he attached a sentence to it. This happened because you are not enough. When the failure came, he added a subtitle. This is your real identity showing through. When the silence from heaven stretched on, he provided an interpretation that felt more real than anything I had spoken. You have been forgotten. Those sentences were not your thoughts. I need you to absorb that today with everything you have. Those interpretations that felt so natural, so aligned with the visible evidence, they were planted. Engineered by an intelligence that understands exactly which frequency your doubts vibrate on until you mistake his voice for your own. He did not need you to believe him enthusiastically. He only needed you to believe him by default, the kind of belief that sits in the background of every self-assessment, like a filter you forgot you were wearing. And I will be honest with you because you deserve honesty from me, even when it is uncomfortable. There were seasons when that strategy worked. There were months when the face in the mirror was filtered entirely through his interpretation. You saw someone who was behind. Someone whose best opportunities had expired. You agreed with his assessment quietly, the way a person agrees with gravity. as though it were simply the nature of things, and arguing against it would be absurd. If you recognize those planted interpretations, if you can now see that what you believed about yourself during the hardest seasons was never your conclusion, but was a verdict placed there by an enemy who feared what you carry, type these words right now. The lies were planted. The truth was written. Let heaven hear you reject the counterfeit narrative out loud for the first time. But here is what the enemy never accounted for. Here is the detail that overturned his entire strategy and caused every calculation he made about your destruction to collapse. He assumed that sustained pressure layered over real pain would eventually produce permanent agreement. A point where the lie became so embedded it functioned as fact, where the inscription would still exist inside you but would never be accessed, never be activated, because the person carrying it had been convinced she carried nothing worth discovering. He brought you close to that point. I will not minimize how close it was. There were moments you remember right now as I described them, when you were within reach of signing the document that would have sealed the lie as permanent. I accept that this is all I am. I accept that nothing more is coming. I accept that I was simply not chosen for more. You never signed it. Something interrupted the signature every single time. Not a dramatic intervention. Not a voice from the sky. Something much quieter. A hesitation, a flicker. A refusal so small you barely recognized it as resistance. But it was enough. Every time you reached the threshold of permanent agreement, that small refusal pulled you back by a fraction of an inch, just enough to keep the door from locking. That refusal was the inscription defending itself. What I wrote inside you has a quality the enemy cannot override. It will not consent to its own burial, even when the person carrying it has been worn down to near surrender, even when the conscious mind has almost given up on the possibility that anything significant lives inside them. The inscription continues to pulse. It sends a signal so faint that it barely registers above the noise of the suffering. But faint is enough, because faint means alive, and alive means the enemy has failed. And I want you to understand something about the way that failure registered in the spiritual realm. The enemy does not simply abandon a strategy that has consumed his resources for years and walk away without consequence. When he realized that the inscription could not be buried, when he recognized that no amount of pressure had produced the permanent agreement he was engineering, something shifted in the unseen order of things. His authority over your narrative was revoked, not partially, not temporarily. The right to whisper interpretations over your life that you mistake for your own thoughts was stripped from him the moment the inscription proved that it would not consent to burial. He still speaks. I will not lie to you and tell you that the voice disappears entirely, but it has lost its power to convince. From this point forward, every lie he speaks will sound thinner. Every planted interpretation will feel less natural, because what was proven inside you under maximum pressure has permanently altered the frequency at which truth and deception register in your spirit. Now, I need to address something that has been sitting between us for a long time. The silence. You know exactly which silence I am referring to. The one that stretched across months and in some places across entire years. The silence where you called out and received nothing you could identify as an answer. The silence that hurt more than any attack the enemy ever launched, because at least the attacks told you something was paying attention. The silence felt like being erased. I owe you the truth about that silence. And the truth is not simple. It is not a clean sentence that will retroactively remove the pain. But it is the truth. And the truth is this. The silence was never absence. It was the most active season of work I have ever conducted in your life. The work was being done at a depth that your conscious awareness does not reach. I was shaping the vessel. That is the plainest way I can say it. The inscription I placed in you was always real. It was always present. But the person carrying it was not yet structured in a way that would allow the inscription to function at its full capacity. Carrying a word from heaven is not the same thing as being ready to live from it. Adjustments to your foundations had to be made, to the way you process validation, to the source from which you draw your sense of worth. Those adjustments cannot be made while a person is surrounded by noise and visible progress. They happen in the still places, when every external support has been removed, and you must stand on nothing but the raw foundation I built underneath you. That is what the silent season was. It was a controlled environment where every crutch was pulled away so that I could see whether the foundation could bear weight on its own. And, more importantly, so that you could discover that it could. If something has shifted in your chest during this message, if a pressure that has been sitting behind your ribs for months is beginning to release right now, then I want you to stay in that moment. Do not rush past it. Do not intellectualize it. Just let whatever is moving inside you continue to move. That is not emotion. That is the inscription, waking up. I was never silent because you failed. I need you to receive that sentence today with finality. You were not under discipline. You were not being punished for a prayer you prayed incorrectly, or a mistake you made in a moment of weakness. The silence had nothing to do with your worthiness. It had everything to do with timing. There is a moment in a person's formation when they become capable of receiving truth without it feeding their ego. Before that moment, the same truth that would set them free could set them off course. Spoken too early, it becomes a trophy instead of a foundation. I waited because I love you. That may be the most difficult thing you hear today, because waiting felt like the opposite of love. Silence from the one person you were counting on to speak felt like betrayal. I do not blame you for the conclusions you reached, but I am asking you today to release them. They were logical interpretations of an experience you did not have the full context for. Now you have the context. The silence was surgery, precise and intentional, performed on the deepest structures of who you are, so that what I am revealing today would land in a vessel prepared to hold it. Something happened inside you during those silent years that you never gave yourself credit for. Your need for applause diminished. Not dramatically, but something subtle shifted in the mechanism by which you measured your own value. Before the silent season, you were still dependent on external confirmation. Other people's opinions carried weight they were never meant to carry. Recognition from the people around you still functioned as a thermometer for your sense of worth. By the end of the silent season, something had changed. You did not need it the way you used to. The applause was no longer the primary source. You are still human and recognition still feels good, but the center of your stability had migrated from the surface to the core, where I live, where the inscription sits, where nothing external can reach it without my permission. That migration is what the silence produced, and it could not have been produced any other way. It could only have been forged in a prolonged season, where every external source of validation was removed, and you were left standing in the bare reality of who you are. The person who emerged from that season is different from the one who entered it, and the difference is exactly what I was working toward. If you have a friend or a family member who is in the middle of their own silent season right now, someone who is wondering whether God has forgotten them, whether the waiting means the answer is no, I need you to send them this message today. Think of at least 4 people who are standing in that quiet place right now and feel completely alone. Send it directly. In a text message to the person whose face just appeared in your mind, in your family group chat, in your WhatsApp group. Let this word reach them before another night passes in silence. The person who emerged from that season carries something that cannot be counterfeited. There is a quality in a person who has been truly formed in silence that no amount of training or performance can replicate. It is the quiet certainty of someone who knows what they survived and knows who held them while they survived it. That quality is now permanently resident in you. It does not depend on your feelings. It does not fluctuate with your circumstances. It was installed through a process that cannot be reversed, and it will serve you in every season that follows for the rest of your life. Now, I need to say something to you about the way you describe yourself, because what you say over your own life carries weight that you have not fully understood until now. And the language you have been using is borrowed from the enemy's dictionary. I have been listening to the way you talk about yourself, not just the words spoken aloud, but the silent sentences that run through your mind when you are alone with your own reflection. You speak over yourself with the vocabulary of someone who has already been convicted, as though the jury returned a verdict years ago and you have been serving the sentence ever since, without ever questioning whether the trial was legitimate. I am behind schedule. I have wasted years I cannot recover. People who started later than I did have already arrived at places I have not begun to approach. I do not trust the way I used to. Something inside me is permanently diminished. Stop. I say this to you today with the full weight of my authority. Those sentences are a prison. Every time you repeat them, you are reinforcing walls the enemy built around the inscription. You are doing his maintenance work for him, actively participating in the suppression of the very thing I placed inside you to set you free. Today, you begin speaking a different language over your life, not with forced positivity, with accuracy. The old sentences were interpretations borrowed from the worst seasons and applied as permanent descriptions to a story that is still being written. You are not behind. You are on a path that was never designed to match anyone else's timeline. You have not been forgotten. I have been present for every second of every silent season. You are not permanently diminished. What was forged in you is the strongest material in the spiritual realm, and it is ready. Change the language. Today, when the old sentence arrives, and it will arrive because it has been rehearsed for years and momentum does not disappear in a single afternoon, interrupt it. Say aloud, "That is not my language anymore. Heaven spoke something different over me." You do not need to feel it before you say it. Feeling follows language. Speak first. The alignment of your heart with the words will follow in its own time. Let me tell you what is coming, not as vague encouragement that evaporates by morning, as a specific declaration from the one who designed every stage of your journey with full knowledge of where it leads. The season of hidden preparation is complete. What was built during the years that produced no visible fruit is fully formed. The roots that grew in the dark have reached the depth they were designed to reach. The foundation laid during the silence is now load-bearing, and the things I am preparing to place on that foundation will require every ounce of strength, every thread of faithfulness, every reserve of compassion that the pressure seasons forged in you. Visibility is coming. I do not mean fame, and I do not mean recognition from the platforms that measure value by numbers. I mean this. The qualities that were built in you in secret are about to be needed. People are going to walk into your life carrying the exact weight your experience has equipped you to understand. Doors are going to open that were designed for someone with your particular combination of tenderness and endurance, and no one else fits the lock. You will walk into rooms and carry something that changes the atmosphere before you open your mouth. Not because you will perform or deliver a speech, because what lives at the level of the inscription will radiate. The people in genuine need will feel it the way a person standing in the cold feels warmth through an open doorway. They will not be able to explain why they trust you, but they will know. Because real depth is unmistakable to anyone who has been searching for it. Type this as your final declaration today. I was built for what is coming. What was forged in me will not be wasted. Let heaven record those words from your mouth. Let the enemy hear them. Let the old vocabulary hear them and know that its authority over your self-perception has been permanently revoked. Now hear the decree. This is a pronouncement spoken over your life by the authority that created you and sustained you through every season that tried to end you. You are not ordinary. It is a fact established by what was found when the fire burned away everything that was not permanent. The inscription that I carved into your deepest foundations before time had a name for you, has been tested by pressures that were designed to obliterate it, and it held. Every line of it, every word, every promise encoded in its surface. The enemy threw his full arsenal at it and walked away with nothing. The silence stretched over it for years, and when it was uncovered, it was sharper than the day it was written. What I wrote in you is finished work. It cannot be undone by any season that has passed, and it will not be undone by any season that is coming. You stopped heaven. Hear that one more time, because your habit of deflecting truth away from yourself is about to try to intercept this sentence. You stopped heaven. The courts went silent when they saw what survived inside you. Not because you performed well, not because your record was clean, because under the most extreme conditions that a human spirit can endure, what I placed at your core did not move. It did not waver. It did not negotiate with the pressure for a compromise. It held. And what holds under that kind of fire is rare enough to make every being in the courts pause and bear witness. Walk forward from this moment. Not loudly, not glancing sideways at anyone else's pace. Walk with the settled certainty of someone who knows what they carry because the one who placed it there just confirmed it with his own voice. The inscription is real. The depth is real. And the season opening in front of you was designed for a person who carries exactly what you carry. You were built for this. Move forward. My beloved child, before you go, carry this with you. The truth spoken over you today does not expire when this message ends. It was true before you heard it, and it remains true regardless of what the next week attempts to place on top of it. Let the full weight of everything spoken today settle into the places where the old vocabulary used to live. Let the new language take root. And, if this message carried something not meant for you alone, share it. Send it to someone still standing in the silence. Post it in your church group. Forward it to your family chat. Let the word reach the person on the verge of signing the enemy's document and interrupt that signature the way it interrupted yours. If you want to walk deeper with this family of believers, if you want to become part of a community where every voice matters and every prayer is heard, I invite you to visit through the link in the description or the pinned comment. Subscribe to this channel so the next word finds you ready. Whether through a small offering, becoming a member, or simply adding your presence to a circle of faith that refuses to let anyone stand alone. Your step forward is a seed, planted in ground that heaven is already watering. Come as you are, stay for what is coming, and discover what happens when a family built on the inscription stands together. Now I pray over you, Father, seal every word that was spoken today into the foundations of this child's spirit. Let no voice of the enemy revisit what was settled here. Let no comparison diminish what was established. Let no returning silence be misread as absence ever again, where the old language tried to write a permanent verdict. Let the new language rise with authority and overwrite every lying sentence. The inscription holds. The depth is real. The preparation is complete, and the one who carries it is ready for everything you have placed ahead. Walk with them into the season that opens now. Walk with them the way you walked with them through the fire, and let every step they take from this moment forward echo with the unshakable truth of what you wrote inside them before the world had a single word to say about their name. In the mighty name of Jesus Christ. Amen.